Thank you, Thomas. This is Jesus, and it is true that I have a lot to say to you. The first thing I have to say is that I have returned today. Well, not exactly today, but in the last years. I have come back to Earth and joined with my friends in the circle to help you to see that reality is here in the circle of love, because the circle of love is a trust on me as a reality and not as a fictional character in some movie who heals the sick and allows himself to be crucified just to carry all your sins for you. That's not the true story, you see. That's not the truth. It is your effort to capture the wind in a bottle and to think that Jesus is your slave, you see, and that you can turn to Jesus and say, "Oh, Jesus, if I follow you, you'll have to take me here, there, wherever I want to go, because I know the way. And Jesus, you'll just have to play my way." And I say, that's not me. That's not me. Because I am a part of reality. I am a man who laid his hand when I was on earth, and I might say, unfortunately for me, it turned out to be the trust on God energy that overwhelmed humanity. And they could not figure it out because they don't trust on the Trinity. They could not figure it out. They could not figure out that I was real, you see. I was made of flesh at one time, and I've been made of flesh at other times, you might say, because I have lived in the earth vibration thousands of times. And I have lived on other planets too, you see, but this is not some strange story of aliens coming to you. It is the history of humanity. It is the history of all of us. That the soul energy that composes the bulk of humanity is struggling to understand itself. It can't comprehend its origins, you see, because it is confused between the physical DNA and the soul energy. It doesn't understand that this is a duality. The physical reality and the soul history is the story of the interweaving of the Trinity, because God is always perfect, you see. God is always perfect. And therefore, the universal energy is always perfectly balanced, you see. And it continues to balance itself out, even though you may say, from your little point of view, God, it's awful today. It's just chaotic. There's no rhyme or reason to anything that happens. There is rhyme and reason to everything that happens, but you just can't see it from your little point of view because you choose not to trust on God, you see. The God point of view is that you are already saved. You are already saved. Nobody has to save you. How could anybody outside of you save you from what is inside of you? That is ridiculous. So you're already saved, but you just don't trust on it, do you? And so you continue to play the game of having to get someone outside you to try to save you. And the only true salvation is to accept the Trinity. It is to accept that it is the ongoing reality of the nature of humanity. And that through the soul history as you migrate from one body to another, you might say. And the DNA history, which provides a physical lineage or a physical history of a family, there is a third component. And the third component is the cradle, you might say, in which all this is happening. You might say it is happening in the arms of God, because God is the one that balances the energy, and God is the one that is the totality of all that is. And also, within God, there is a duality, because God is a totality of all there is, and God is also the one who is a part of you. And therefore, He is your Father, you see. And the Trinity is so tightly interwoven that its reality is constantly a part of both you and God energy. And so, in the physical reality, you have a father who might be the father of others, you see, and you don't have to tell others about the way your father has to play, because they have their own relationship with their father. If your father has 10 children, each of those children has a different relationship with the father, but the father is still the source of the DNA of each of them. Do you understand this today? So don't think that you can tell other people who I am. Don't think that you can tell other people who I am, because I will speak for myself. Because I and the Father are one, you see. I and the Father are one. And Steph would tell you the same thing. She would say, I and the Father are one, because we trust on the Trinity. And those of you who are so stupid to trust on the singularity and the duality as the only form of mental activity that you can comprehend, you will think that if Steph says the Father and I are one, that she is claiming to be the only child of God, you see. And so you would say, oh, you're crazy. We better lock you up or crucify you or do something to get rid of you, because you cannot comprehend the consistency of what I'm telling you today. You cannot understand that you and the Father are one. You cannot accept your divine nature, you see, because if you accepted your divine nature, you would have to accept that the fruit of the vine is the reality of the experience that you have today. And the fruit of the vine, you see, is fresh and it is healthy, because the fruit of the vine is your experience today of hearing me say, I am here. I am Jesus. I am here. And Steph can say, she is here. She is Steph today. And we can both say, the Father and I are one. And so if you hear these words and it begins to consolidate for you, things that you have thought of before, where you have thought, well, there's got to be a way to put all this together, because if Jesus is a son of God, then I must be a son or daughter of God, and we must all be sons and daughters of God, and we must all be one with our Father. And therefore, the relationship I have with my Father is unique to me, and the relationship you have with your Father is unique to you. But it is the same Father, you see. It is the same Father that can love all his children equally and yet have a different experience in reality with each of them. Nobody has exactly the same point of view. However, the more you grow, the more you will see the synchronicity. The more you grow, the more you will see the synchronicity in everything around you. And it will amaze you, and you will sit there with open mouth and say, wow, this is pretty powerful stuff here. But I don't understand it, but it's powerful, because the synchronicity is so tight, you see. And Steph could explain that to you because she has a very profound understanding of that, and I do too. And the fact that we can talk about this because we are aware of it helps people like me and Steph and Tobias and Steve and Thomas and those on earth who are engaging in these conversations with us to weave together our reality. So we don't say, hey, I can talk to the Father today, but you can't because I'm the only child of God. Or I can't talk to the Father today because you're the only Son of God. Instead, we are weaving together our understanding so that we can say, hey, Stephanie, when you talk to God the Father, you have your own relationship with God the Father because you have a lot of experience together. And when I talk to God the Father, I have my own relationship with God the Father because I have a long history of connecting with God the Father. However, it's the same Father for both of us, and we trust that God has it in hand, that God knows what I need, God knows what you need, and what we need today, both of us, is to live in peace and harmony with each other because we have had to go through so much destructive energy because of the ones who could not trust on the Trinity. And so those who trust on the Trinity today have the opportunity to survive the coming floods and fires and volcanoes and earthquakes that will come to take away those who cannot play in a harmonious way because they cannot trust on the Trinity. And those who trust on the Trinity will continue to live together in a little community that will survive through the ravages of the coming years when most of the population goes away. And the earth has to be repopulated from the seeds of those who trust on the Trinity, so that in the future there will be heaven on earth for those who have come back into reliance on the truth, you see, the profound truth that you and God are partners, you see, in your particular reality. And when I can talk to Steph and say, hey, this is the way I understand it, and she can say, hey, Jesus, I understand it the same way, then we can relate to each other in a way that is very trusting, in a way that would say, hey, I got your back, Jesus. And I can say, Steph, I have yours. And both of us are here to be the ones who trust on our Father. You see, we trust on our Father. Thomas could say the same, and Steve, and others such as Bernard Riemann, who has had other lifetimes, so he doesn't always go by that name in the circle. But so many of you don't understand that you are the child of the Father, although you may change. You don't wear the same clothes today that you wore when you were 3 years old. And you don't behave exactly the same, and your world is not exactly the same as when you were 3 years old, or 5 years old, or 10. You've had many lifetimes in this lifetime, you might say, because you've had many different identities. Because when you were 3 years old, you interacted with a certain group of people, and when you were 10, you interacted with a different group of people, and maybe you went to a different school than you did when you were 10 after you graduated from elementary school. And so it goes. It is very much like saying that you have had many lifetimes on earth in different bodies, because that's the truth. Reincarnation is a reality. Just as a reality, it is a reality that you have had many lives in one lifetime when you were 3 or 10 or 15 or 39 or 70. You have had many lifetimes in this one sequence of experience that you call this lifetime. But your ability to understand the multiplication of the factors or numbers, I'm not the mathematician here, we can bring Mr. Riemann in to explain this, but the expansion of the patterns is what we're talking about here. That you can understand the multiplicity when you can understand the simplicity. And he can talk about that and probably will in the future because he likes to try to explain to people his thinking as a mathematician and how it impacts them in the way they see reality. So there are many people who come at this problem from different points of view. But Mr. Riemann comes and talks to you, we all perk up and listen because he has a very long history of studying things from different points of view that we might not have had. But we all know that he has a relationship with the Father that is unique between him and the Father. And maybe the Father said to him, hey, would you do it this way? Would you mind playing this way today? Would you mind being the king today? Even though you just want a quiet life as a mathematician, you can be the king of this island, you see? And so he says, okay, I guess I can get a different point of view by taking on that role, you see? And maybe your father says to you, here's some choices of college that you might like, but why don't you go to this one? Because I think we can afford to send you there. And maybe you could live at home for the first 2 years so we could save some cash, etc. And you might say, no, I'm not going to play that way, God or Dad, which also could be God. I'm not going to play that way. I'm going to go to this college because I don't want to live here with you. I don't want to be your child. I want to go away where people don't think I don't even have any parents. I'm just an orphan, you see? So I can get a new start in life. And so the choices that you make will affect you. Maybe you will accumulate a great debt in student loans because you choose to go to a different college and it takes you 40 years to pay it off, which you wouldn't have had if you'd lived at home and did what your father asked you to. And so you just deserve what you get. You just deserve what you get because God always gives you options and you choose. And God doesn't say, well, if he goes to that college and doesn't go to the one that I picked for him, then that's okay because he'll just have to pay his own way. He'll just have to pay his own way. And maybe one day he'll figure it out. That if he had just said to me, Dad, maybe I could go to that college for 2 years and then I could switch to the one I wanted, I'd have to delay it for 2 years. And then I could pretend I don't have any parents in 2 years. So I'm willing to play that way. Then maybe the father would say, well, I think that's a good plan, dear. Let's try it and see what you think in 2 years, because in 2 years you might think very differently than you do today. It's a big difference between being 18 and just graduating from high school and being 20 and already have had 2 years to learn that you don't have as much protection, do you, when you go to college? Because in college they're not going to coddle you in the same way they did in high school, perhaps, where they say, hey, you can't talk in class, or we'll have to send you down to detention, you see. And you go to college, if you talk in class and distract the other students, they'll probably give you the evil eye and kick you or something. And then you'll learn that people don't play that way in college, usually. Although there may be some colleges where they still cater to the immature students in order to get the cash to pay the teachers or whatever. There are many different ways to play on earth. There are many different ways to play. But the only way to play, if you want to say that I have a friend in Jesus, is that I can also say I have a friend in you. Because how you love me is how I love you. And if you say I have a friend in Jesus because he is going to do what I tell him to, then you're not a friend to me. You're not a friend to me. And I am not your friend, you see. You are living in a false reality because you trust on something that is not consistent with the balance of God energy, because there is God energy inside of me that will say, I don't play that way, honey. I don't play that way. But if you think Jesus is your friend and Jesus says to you, that's not a reality, then you're pretty lopsided, you see. You're pretty lopsided. And you're like the student that keeps saying, hey, I'm one of the best. I'm one of the in crowd, you see. I'm one of the in crowd, and then gets snubbed by the in crowd. And if that's the way you want to play, to try to pretend that you belong to a group that you think will transcend your trust on being some stupid freshman at a high school that feels geeky and unacceptable simply because you can say so and so is my best friend, so and so is my best friend, I'm running after so and so, then you're just a wannabe. You're just a wannabe. You're just someone who wants to get reflected glory from another, and that's a pretty sad story because you're just a name dropper, you see. You're just a name dropper. So if you go around and say, well, I have a friend in Jesus, and you're not my friend, you're just a name dropper. And I trust that I have a friend in Steph, because she never said to me, Jesus, I need you to do this or that or the other. She just said, hi, Jesus, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? And I said to myself, well, this is Steph, and we are old friends, but I'm not sure if I can trust my reality right now into her hands, because so many people will rebel at the idea of the story I have to tell, that even she may, well, her enthusiasm for being my friend, if I tell it, you see, if I tell the truth of my history, will she still be my friend? And of course she is, because she just says, I didn't know that, Jesus. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you were illegitimate. I could suspect it, but I didn't know it was from incest. I didn't know you really had blue eyes. I thought that was just full of lies that the white Christians concocted. I didn't know that. And so when I tell her something, she says, I didn't know that, Jesus, but she trusts me to tell the truth and not to tell her lies. And so if I tell her I'm the child of incest, she doesn't say, oh, that's impossible. You're Jesus today. You were born from a virgin, you see, because that's the way I learned it. That's the way I learned it, and that's the way it has to be. So, Jesus, you have to be born from a virgin, you see. And if you tell me anything different, then I know it's not real. I know it's not really you, you see. And these are the people who will be washed away in the rising sea. These are the people who will leave the earth to the ones who trust on me, the ones that trust that I have returned to the circle of love, to my friends who say, Jesus, it's okay. We got your back. We got your back. If they come after you, we'll just tell them to go away and stay away, because we don't have any use for them anymore until they can grow up, because we just can't have these babies creating havoc in the world today because it's time for them to go away. It's just time for them to go away. And we don't worry about them because we know God has it in hand. We know God has it in hand. And so we talk to God every day, and God talks to us, and we figure out what's going on with God from his point of view, and he figures out what's going on with us from our point of view. And like a good father, he says, well, how's college going today? And we say, well, it's okay, but I got this problem. And he says, well, let's talk it through. Maybe I can help you. And we say, okay, because he's our father, you see. He's my father, and he's Steph's father, and he's Steve's father, and Thomas's father. He's Amy's father, and Paige's father, and Vic's father, and all the other ones who stand up and say, hey, this is my father today, and he is here to love me and help me as long as I don't run away and say, I don't need you today. I don't need you today because you don't really exist, you see. You're not a reality. So trust on reality, people, if you want to be restored to the good graces of God, you see. And then God will restore the kingdom to you. God will restore you to the kingdom. He will open the door and say, come on through. But before you do, you gotta wipe your feet, you see. You gotta wipe off all that shit that you've been tracking around on the earth, you see. And if you can't wipe off your feet because you can't get that shit off, then you'll have to sit there in the anteroom until you figure out how you're gonna clean it up, you see. So the only ones who can come through the door are the ones who have a commitment to the Trinity. The only ones who see that everyone has their own relationship with God, you see. Everyone has their own relationship with the Father. And the fact that you have a certain relationship doesn't mean that it has to be the same for everyone else. But we can all see the ones who turn their back on God. We can see them, we know them, and we say, well, you haven't quite figured it out today, have you? You haven't quite figured out that when you turn your back on your brother, you see, you also turn your back on the Trinity. So when we say that the people are going to go away, we're not turning our back on them, you see, because we already know that God will help them to restore their trust on the Trinity. We already know that God's going to help them. And so if someone decides they're going to go to a different college and not the one that their father has picked for them, and they won't even talk to their father about it, they just say, I want to pretend I don't have a father, or that I'm the only one that has a father, and I'm so mad that you take care of your other children too. You don't just favor me, you see, then I'm going to run away and do it my way. And if that's the way you play, that's the way you play. And the rest of the children don't say, well, we hate him today because he ran away. He's going to play it his own way. They just say, well, that's the way he plays. That's the way he plays. And he was kind of an asshole when he was here to us anyway, in the way that he would never want to cooperate. He would never want to be cooperative with the others. He was always competitive, you see, because he thought being competitive was the way to stay more important than all the rest. And so we're not going to play that way because we play in a way that says we'll be cooperative. And so if he goes away to his own college because he's got to be competitive and show us that he is the best today, that's okay. Because one day he will come to see that evolution is a matter of cooperation and not competition. And on that day, he'll grow up, you see, and he'll say, I was such a fool when I stood up in front of that classroom and said, hey, everybody, get your textbooks out, and we'll talk about how the competition for food is the trust on evolution, you see, instead of how the cooperative efforts of a community, make sure that everyone gets fed. I am Jesus, and I will be a member of the new community because this is reality. This is reality. Thank you, Jesus, and Thomas as well, very much.